As we continue to get reaction around this, there are a number of concerns here, given just how the implications will affect so many countries globally. I mean, we've been speaking with economists here in South Africa, and of course, economists warning that these trade wars could really spark some form of a global recession. Of course, concerns on a wide scale around this, taxing all imports will also, they say, lead to greater costs of U.S. businesses, which will then raise prices for U.S. consumers. So we'll continue then to unpack just the implications on various fronts. We also spoke earlier on to our international news editor, Sophie Mugwana, here in studio, just looking at the implications on the African continent. And of course, an AU meeting then being called where the heads of state will then convene and talk about those implications, particularly on your smaller markets. We know, of course, that Trump imposed 50% of tariffs to Lesotho as an example, and those that are more than 30% to South Africa. So what then are the implications even on that front as we speak, on South African particular industries, and which industries then will also be exempt? Concern also coming in given the fact that AGOA, as many put it, will be taken away when it comes to renewal. That is around the end of September. But let's continue then to give you the sense of what else is happening around the world, particularly in the U.S., as markets in that country have opened lower following a days-long trend which was exacerbated by news out of China earlier today, as we've been reporting, slapping an additional 50% tariff on all U.S. imports. That's 50%. A full-blown trade war between the world's largest economies now appears to be in full flight after the U.S. raised tariffs on Chinese imports to a staggering 104% overnight. And China now responding with an effective 84% levy on all U.S. goods in response. And these comments at the National Republican Congressional Committee dinner by President Donald Trump overnight likely didn't also help. Let's listen.
Don't let some of these politicians go around saying, because I'm telling you, these countries are calling us up, kissing my ass. They are dying to make a deal. Please, sir, make a deal. I'll do anything. I'll do anything, sir. And then I'll see some rebel Republican, some guy that wants to grandstand, say, I think that Congress should take over negotiations. Let me tell you, you don't negotiate like I negotiate. Congress takes over negotiating. Sell America fast because you're going to go busted. You don't. I just saw it today. A couple of your congressmen said, I think we should get involved in the negotiation of the tariff. So that's what I need. I need some guy telling me how to negotiate. I tell you, the happiest people in the world would be China. They wouldn't be paying 104%. I tell you, they'd be paying no percent. We'd be paying them 104%. That's the beauty. Is these guys, we got to be careful. And even the concept of it hurts your negotiation. When they see a little story like that, the other side, it hurts your negotiation. And then the fake news wants to build it up, and it has no chance anyway. But we have to remain united.
All right, let's now invite our SABC News correspondent, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, just to give us more updates on this story that has been leading our bulletins. Sherwin, a very good afternoon to you. So markets opened a short time ago in New York on the back, of course, of China earlier today, slapping an additional 50% tariff on all U.S. imports. What is the early sentiment, given the escalation we are seeing now from both Beijing and Washington today?
Unati, here's the kicker. The markets are in the green at the moment after opening up in the red, but that speaks to the volatility, the lack of direction here in U.S. markets, the up and down effect. That speaks to uncertainty, the anxiety that is permeating the relationship and investors are having with these tariffs. And of course, the escalation you are seeing from the world's two largest economies. This is a $600 billion relationship in terms of trade that moves between the United States and China. And of course, now you have this 104% tariff on all Chinese goods into the United States. China then reciprocating with 84% tariffs. That makes these goods very, very expensive. The question now becomes, who is going to blink first? Let me tell you what the United States is saying. The Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, doing interviews on some of the morning shows here this morning, said the following: China's response is unfortunate and it is a losing position from Beijing. Of course, that comes in response to what the Chinese Commerce Ministry said overnight. They were saying that they are resolutely opposed to the United States tariffs. They vowed to take countermeasures. The countermeasures you have seen, right? Choreographed in terms of what the United States is doing. China then responds. It says the U.S. threat to escalate tariffs is a mistake on top of a mistake. China will never accept it. If the U.S. insists on this path, China will fight to the end. And so you're seeing this volatility in terms of the markets. There is a great deal of unease here in the United States. A number of Americans have their 401ks, which is essentially their retirement plans, invested through various avenues in the stock market. And these are people, these are middle of the road, middle class people who are losing tens of thousands of dollars as you see the market slide. Of course, it has lost since Donald Trump's inauguration over $10 trillion. That hurts business. That hurts people in their pockets. Yes, you talk about, this might not affect, sort of more vulnerable people at the lower rung of the economy. But what you're going to now see is an increase in perishable goods. Grocery prices are going to go up. Electronics are going to go up. Cars are going to go up. And what did we hear out of the European Union just a short time ago? They have now responded with tariffs of around up to 25% on some 23 billion dollars worth of goods. They have approved up to 25 on a wide range of goods. I've just lost my connection to you, so I'm going to keep talking here, Nati. On a wide range of U.S. products: soybeans, meat, iron, steel, textiles, tobacco, ice cream. We did see some pullback from the EU Commission in this announcement. They had targeted, the intention was to target American bourbon here, but due to Trump's threat to impose a counter tariff of up to 200% on all alcohol, your champagne, your wines, etc., coming to the United States from the EU, we saw a backtrack from the European Commission here. So how does this affect the small guy? I've lost my connection, so I'm just going to keep talking. How does this affect the small guy here, right? Countries like Lesotho that have seen a 50% tariff imposed on their goods to the United States. The concern is job losses. We heard from the UN Secretary General yesterday. Okay, I've got you back, guys. We heard from the Secretary General yesterday saying that, this... let me clarify my position. He said trade wars are extremely negative. Nobody wins with the trade war. Everybody tends to lose. And I'm particularly worried with the most vulnerable developing countries, in which the impact will be more devastating. I sincerely hope that we will not have a recession, because a recession will have dramatic consequences, especially for the poorest people of the world, right? And so while the elephants fight, Unati, it's the grass that gets trampled underneath. The countries like Lesotho, 30% tariff on South Africa. This is going to affect jobs. This is going to affect prices. And this is going to go to the heart of the UN's development agenda. What are we not talking about today? We're not talking about the Pact of the Future. We're not talking about common but differentiated responsibilities in terms of climate action. We're talking about a trade war here that is going to hurt the most vulnerable people in economies around the world.
Absolutely, Sherwin. And I think you touched on all the right points, particularly, of course, those concerns by the UN and the World Trade Organization, because, I mean, we've also been speaking to economists who've warned that, U.S. President Trump's trade war, which, kicked into its highest gear yet this week, or last week at least, is likely to hurt Americans more. And you've touched on, how that is impacting on local businesses there. There are now even concerns about talks of recession. So I can imagine the anxiety.
Well, Goldman Sachs has raised its recession barometer to around 40%. That followed the largest financial wealth management company in the United States, JP Morgan, putting that likelihood at around 60%. And those numbers have been edging up since the inauguration of President Donald Trump. And, of course, his affinity here for tariffs. This, of course, has created concern in terms of the broader global economic outlook by organizations like the International Monetary Fund. Fund. Of course, their spring meetings are happening in Washington, D.C. Later this month in April. And then, of course, from organizations like the World Trade Organization. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is the Director General there. She put out a statement late last week saying the following: the recent announcements will have substantial implications on global trade and economic growth prospects. This hurts the poorest of the poor, right? If the economy is not growing in countries like South Africa, where for years you have seen tepid growth that is not making a dent to the extent that is desirable in terms of alleviating poverty, the extent to which you need to grapple with a stubbornly high unemployment, these kinds of moves are not going to help countries that are already struggling in this, low growth bubble. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, saying the following: trade measures of this magnitude have the potential to create significant trade diversion effects. I call on all members of the WTO to manage the resulting pressures responsibly to prevent trade tensions from proliferating. The WTO was established to serve precisely in moments like this, as a platform for dialogue to prevent trade conflicts from escalating and to support an open and predictable trading environment. Unfortunately, I think it's clear to say that the WTO is failing in terms of preventing the escalating trade war we are now seeing between China and the United States.
Absolutely, Sherwin. Thank you so much for that update and, of course, analysis. SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease.